Oh, hello everyone, I'm RV Micah, and welcome to the show, where I'm in the mood to play something nostalgic, so I've just been going over a bunch of my old nostalgic childhood games. Let's see if I have anything I can do a video on. Alright, let's see what we got here. Tetris Worlds. I'm gonna do that as part of the Tetrispective. Republic Commando. Now that was a good game, but you know what, I think I'm just gonna do a bunch of Star Wars stuff in May, so I'll save that. Roller Coaster Tycoon. Well, I got a lot of fond memories of that one, but I feel like it deserves a full retrospective instead of just a one-off video. Oh, what's this? Spore? You know what, I remember this game. I was super hyped for this thing when it first came out. I had some really good times with this one. Wonder if it still holds up. Spore was the brainchild of Will Wright, the man behind SimCity and The Sims, two other genre-defining games. Spore was originally conceived as the game Sim Everything. It would sort of have been like SimCity, but on a universal scale. It saw the player create a single-celled organism that would grow and evolve into a land creature, eventually gain sentience and advance their civilization until they eventually got to travel to space. There was a ton of hype for this game, and it came with like a bajillion spin-offs, a dark and gritty semi-sequel no one played, and I think there were even plans for a movie at some point, but despite the small devoted fan base that still creates stuff to this day, people by and large have stopped talking about it. So let's talk about it. Development proper began in 2000 and it was officially unveiled in 2005. Now, Spore has one of the most interesting development cycles I've seen in a while. We've seen stages that got cut, stages that were combined, etc., but here's the main thing you ought to know. See, you might notice from these earlier gameplay showcases that the earlier versions of the game had a more scientific edge to it. But at some point during development, the staff got into a bit of a civil war, with one side wanting the game to be dark, serious, and scientifically accurate, and the other side wanting to make the game cute and cartoony. Which side won out in the end? I think you can figure that out for yourself. I'm not sure the specifics of that standoff, but I'm willing to bet it was EA's fault somehow. So why have I spent so much time talking about the development cycle of this game instead of the game itself? I don't know, maybe I just wanted a chance to badmouth EA for a bit. In any event, let's stop beating around the bush and talk about Will Wright's universe simulator, Spore.
Particle man, doing the things a particle can. What's he like? It's not important. Particle man, is he a dot or is he a speck?
So as it turns out, the save screen is, in fact, the galaxy we'll be playing within, which is pretty cool for reasons I'll explain in a bit. So for now, let's just pick a planet to start out on, give it a name, and now I gotta pick whether I want to start as a carnivore or an herbivore. I'm gonna play as a meat eater because I'm a red-blooded American! Now the game is split into 5 phases, reflecting your creation's various stages of development, starting with the first phase, the cell phase. This first stage can be best described as Pac-Man without the maze. You swim around the tide pool in a top-down view eating everything in sight. If you're an herbivore, you can eat these plant things. But if you're a red-blooded American meat eater, like me, you need to go after other cells. Once you have enough DNA points, your currency for customizing your creation, you can find a mate. And I gotta say, this cell is a pretty swell guy. He respects his mate's personal boundaries so much that he doesn't even come near her during sex. Anyway, this takes you to the cell creator. Here you can finally name your microbe and customize it with different parts, each of which give it different abilities. It's really intuitive and flexible. I named my creation the VRV because I just wrote down whatever sounded cool at the time. And then I changed it to ViriRV later because I don't know, actually. So I can't really afford to make my cell very fast, so I tried to stick spikes on my tail to deal with predators chasing me down. But I decided it would probably be better to place them next to the mouth, like tusks or something, and that worked out better. I later got access to a poison gland that fills the same function as putting spikes on the tail to ward off predators. Oh yeah, I should probably explain how you get new parts. You can find them by breaking open bits of meteorite, but if you're a red-blooded American meat eater, you get them by killing cells that have those parts. You gain DNA points from eating, and you can upgrade your cell by mating. You just eat and mate and eat and mate and
eat and sleep and mate and roll around in your own filth and mate.
So the cell phase is a pretty decent introduction to the game's main mechanics of deciding how you want to progress and optimizing your creations. This phase is simple, intuitive, and decently pretty fun. though it can get a bit tedious later on when you're dealing with much larger microbes as well as other environmental hazards like water currents and other assortment flotsam and jetsam. All in all, the cell phase is decent in its own right, and every mechanic it introduces is expanded upon in the game's second stage, the creature phase. So you enter a 3D creature creator, add a pair of legs, move some parts around to make it look less dorky, and congratulations, you're on land now. One thing you'll notice is that for every phase you complete, in later stages you gain a consequence action based on how you completed that specific phase, and each stage in the game has a consequence for all future stages, so there is a bit of planning out your character build in this game. So how does the creature phase work? Well, your main objective is no longer just to eat, but you still need to do that in order to survive. Instead, your goal is to gain DNA points by either hunting other species to extinction, socializing with them and making friends, or some combination of the two. In this case, since I played the cell phase as a red-blooded American meat-eater, I figure I'll stay the course and play as a hunter, meaning for the creature phase, my ultimate goal I'm working towards is
radical genocide.
Honestly, I always found the predator route much more fun than the social route. The game plays a lot more like a 3D action RPG, with abilities having cooldowns and whatnot like an MMO, and there's a lot more strategy to the combat than simply poke the enemy with pointy bit. You can charge them from a distance and stun them, poison them with a ranged spit attack, or just slice and dice. You unlock new parts by finding fossils scattered around the landscape, as if you're absorbing the parts into your DNA. Then you can enter the creature creator once again by mating. And I gotta say, the mating sequence in this game really puts on display the love and affection the Viriarvi have for their unborn. Once you're in the creature creator, you can edit your creature by giving it any of the parts that you've unlocked if you have enough DNA points. Although I should point out that this is less like evolution and more like sticking Lego pieces onto your creature. Like, I'm pretty sure there's no creature in the history of the world that's just randomly decided to grow a pair of wings one generation. One thing I do love about this game, though, is all the random crap that can happen in the creature phase. At one point, a freaking X-Wing showed up and it started abducting things. No, Luke! Why are you doing this? I thought the rebels were supposed to be the good guys! Now's a pretty good time to point out that it's possible to see other people's creations in the game as you play. If you're connected to the internet, that is. Some of them are pretty cool, some of them are kind of lazy, some of them are memes, and quite a few of them I can't show because this is a family channel. What makes it especially cool is that this applies even to your other saved games. It's super cool to run into one of your own creations when you start a new game. That's why it's cool that the save screen is the galaxy, because it's literally the same galaxy for all of them. At a few points, your nest will migrate to a different part of the continent, and you can use the social abilities to recruit other creatures to your posse, and occasionally giant creatures called epic creatures will show up and start beating the crap out of you. This one massacred my entire party and smacked me around like he's the Hulk and I'm Loki. Overall, the creature phase just feels a lot more fleshed out than most of the other stages. By the end of it all, the Viriarvi have a poisonous scorpion tail with antlers on it to intimidate their prey, as well as wings on their feet like Hermes or whatever. And the creature phase ends with a cutscene in which the creature makes an important, groundbreaking discovery.
Piece of wood.
Which brings us into the third phase, the tribal phase. And if I'm being honest, this one kinda sucks. This one plays like a real-time strategy game, which is already a genre I'm less than fond of. Unless it's called Pikmin, you can count me out of it, really. By this point, be aware that you're locked into whatever creature you made because you can no longer customize it. You can change its equipment and clothing and whatnot, but if you created a red-blooded American meat-eater, it will forever remain a red-blooded American meat-eater! You know what, even I'm starting to get sick of this joke, I'm so sorry. In the tribal phase, your main currency is food. You can get food by hunting other creatures or fishing if you're a carnivore, gathering fruit if you're a herbivore, or you can domesticate other species as pets and gather their eggs for both. Food is used to feed your tribe members.
Thank you, Lieutenant Obvious. Sir, it's Captain, sir.
But it's also your currency for building structures within your camp, and it costs 10 foods to add a new baby to your tribe. This is represented by a baby hatching from an egg that rolls out of the chieftain's hut. What's weird, though, is that the egg just appears from the hut, but we never see any of the females who lay the eggs. Which leads me to the conclusion that the chieftain has a harem of women in the hut who are not allowed to go outside and are force-fed until they crap out eggs to populate his tribe, who are then trained as soldiers from birth to carry out his plans of world conquest. Chieftain Cardo, you're history's greatest monster! Shortly after, the tutorial gets you acquainted with the new phase's mechanics, as well as the fact that the right and left mouse buttons have inexplicably switched places for some reason. Other tribes start showing up. I suppose I could be a horrible warmonger and commit genocide like I did before I gained sentience. But you know what? Their days of being predators are far behind them. The Viriarvi are a much more advanced, refined species, far removed from the predators they once were. And so they make extensive use of the tried and true diplomatic strategy that has never failed. Bribery. Yeah, as it turns out, you can send a gift of some of your food to placate the other tribes, and once you ally with them, they'll respond in kind. And if you play the tribal stage as a pacifist, you're basically required to do this, since after a certain amount of time, the other tribes will start acting hostile towards you for pretty much no reason. Yeah, it's like they're just sitting around their camps one day going, oh yeah, look at those guys. Yeah, they have mohawks and they eat eggs. They're a threat to our society, and they must be destroyed. And the thing is, if they decide to attack your village, if you fight back in self-defense, the game treats it the same way as if you went and burned their houses down. Which means that if you want to finish the tribal phase off in the friendly state, you have to keep shoving steak into people's faces until they stop wanting to kill you. Of course, bribery will only get you so far. All it does is get them to stop trying to kill you long enough for you to win them over with a concert. I am not kidding. A concert is how you ally with a neighboring tribe. You heard of gunboat diplomacy? This is didgeridoo diplomacy. Now, you would think that allying with another tribe would allow them to fight alongside you against other tribes if you're so inclined. Well, no, that would actually be cool. All it does is ensure they won't fight you anymore and also occasionally bring you a gift basket. Or some wine.
Or maybe gift baskets with wine.
So whether or not you wipe out another tribe or ally with them, a bit of their totem pole is added to yours and you gain some of their technology. Once all 5 neighboring tribes have been sufficiently bribed, it's off to the civilization phase. This phase is another RTS, but from here on out, your choices are a bit more interesting than just being violent or friendly. You have 3 possible types of civilizations to choose between. Military, which bombs the crap out of other cities until they surrender. Religious, which overthrows entire nations by converting them into your own belief system through the use of giant holograms! And my personal favorite, economic. Here's the way economic civilizations work. They start up a trade route with a city from another nation, then proceed to screw them over in trade negotiations until their economy goes bust and you can bail them out by just buying a city off of them. Now, I finished the tribal phase as a friendly tribe, so I started off as a religious nation, but I immediately took control of 1 military and 1 economic city to have all my bases covered, then spent the rest of my time using my economic cities to cause economic crises around the world. Oh, and bribery. Lots and lots of bribery. In this phase, your main units are vehicles. You can use land and sea vehicles, and after a certain point you gain access to aircraft. You can design them however you want, and aircraft are easily the most powerful, but they're balanced around the fact that they're unable to harvest spice. Spice is the main money maker of the final 2 phases because insert Dune reference here. You spend a lot of the civilization phase balancing your cities, wanting to maintain a good enough balance between population, productivity, and entertainment, and just like the previous phases, you gain special perks based on how you completed other stages in the game, up to and including a freaking nuke. Also, like the tribal phase, everyone else started to hate my guts for no reason, to the point that I actually hit the upper limit of how much I could improve relations through bribery. Apparently, starting as a religious nation puts a permanent penalty on your relations with everyone else. Hey, wait a minute. I started off as a religious nation, I have a stockpile of ICBMs, and every other nation out there hates my guts for some reason. Am I Israel? Now, I know I said before that your options are a bit more interesting, but the actual real-time strategy stuff here is even more bare bones than in the tribal phase. Not really much else to talk about, but I will say it is a lot of fun to design the buildings and the vehicles. Seriously, I could stay here for hours and just build crap. Finally, you take over the world, in my case just by buying everyone else out, and it's time to finally get to the real meat of the game. Space! Now, in this phase, you do technically have an objective, which is to reach the center of the galaxy, but this phase is so much more willing to just let you take your time and progress at your own pace and explore. There is a ton to do here. You can expand your empire and assert dominance in the intergalactic community by terraforming and colonizing uncharted worlds, forging alliances, going to war and conquering other planets, and gaining massive amounts of wealth through the spice trade. Wait, hold on. Spice trade? Gaining wealth? There's capitalism in space? Aw, I thought I was safe from that here.
Space!
Tim Curry, you're a lying sack of crap. Anyway, yeah, spice trade. Harvesting spice from your colonies is your primary source of income in this game. There are multiple different types of spice, and different planets will buy them for different amounts. For example, yellow spice might be worth pocket change to one empire, but another one will empty their life savings for it. Now, I mentioned that you can ally with other alien races, but this honestly isn't as cool as it sounds. Oh sure, they'll lend you some of their ships to your fleet and let you buy stuff from them for cheap, but you also wind up having to deal with all of their problems. Like, you're terraforming a planet, when 50 systems away one of your allies is getting attacked by pirates, or they need you to euthanize animals infected with Ebola or something. It never ends! Not to mention, some alien races will force you to pay tribute under threat of invasion. Some of the more religious empires actually have the audacity to make you pay tithing to their belief system that you aren't even a part of. I make it a policy to be pretty friendly most of the time, but every time one of these guys demands I support their Kickstarter, I just bomb the crap out of them. Not to mention, you sometimes get into a situation where two of your allies are at war with each other and both of them demand your help, and then when you don't intervene, they get mad at you. I really wish there was a way to make peace between them. That seems like a huge wasted opportunity. Now, aside from that, you have an endless amount of stuff to do. You can run quests for other empires, go treasure hunting, terraform planets and decorate them, and eventually you travel to the center of the galaxy to fight the Groks, a feared alien race that looks like the Borg assimilated whatever the heck Stitch was supposed to be, and the end result is a silly and yet surprisingly menacing villain. They're so evil, in fact, that allying with them is considered a war crime by the galaxy at large. Not only that, but all their planets are inhospitable, and terraforming the planets to support life actually kills them. Now, technically, once you unlock the space phase, you can start there on a new saved game anytime you want, but I wouldn't recommend it. Remember all those consequence abilities I was telling you about? Well, in the space phase, you have a ton of those, each one dependent on how you cleared a previous stage. If you start fresh from the space phase, you start with basically nothing, which is kind of a bummer. But luckily, the other stages are really short, only lasting about an hour apiece, while the space phase goes on pretty much forever, even after you achieve your goal of finding the galactic core. And I won't give away what your reward is because it is glorious to behold. Now, normally that's all I would have to say about the space phase, but shortly after the game's release, there came an expansion pack entitled Galactic Adventures. In this expansion, you have the ability to take quests that require you to beam down to the planet's surface and explore on foot, using the same gameplay as the creature phase. You gain access to new weapons and abilities as your captain gains rank, and you even get the opportunity to craft your own adventures to share online. This sounds really cool, and it is. But honestly, I wouldn't recommend getting it. Not only is it overpriced, but the process of gaining experience to unlock new gear is super grindy. Not to mention, most missions you find online are pretty low quality. And if you do one of these quests during the space phase, the planet that it takes place on is inaccessible for the rest of the game. If you like level editors, and I sure as heck do, you'll get a lot of enjoyment out of it, but it's really not for everybody, and I can't really recommend it, unlike the rest of the game. Overall, Spore is worth it just for how customizable it is. You have control over pretty much everything, you can build whatever you want to use however you want, and the space phase in particular is an open sandbox with endless possibilities. And the creature phase, while not as interesting, is still a pretty fun experience overall. But the game's variety, while also one of its greatest strengths, is also its greatest weakness. Because each stage uses a completely distinct gameplay style, there's never really enough time for the game to really have much depth or complexity to its mechanics. The tribal and civilization phases suffer especially because of this. As real-time strategy games, they are as shallow and bare bones as they come. Despite this, Spore was an ambitious little specimen, and when the servers inevitably get shut down one day, it'll be a sad day for all. Even still, while I do absolutely recommend this game, I acknowledge that it doesn't really have much to offer outside of the space phase. I feel like it can't properly rank the game as a whole, so here are my rankings for the different stages. So on average, Spore is what I would consider decent. My final score is a 7 out of 10. And for those of you who are curious, I did in fact create the monstrosity you saw in the thumbnail. Behold! And me!